Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Belonging series. And the Belonging series is Imperial One's exploration into the experiences of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic individuals. We want to just give thanks that this week we have Alinta Sara with us. And Alinta is a researcher, an educator, she coordinates the sickle cell, but she's so much more. And you know what, you're going to really enjoy hearing about Alinta's journey to where she is right now. So Alinta, we want to just say a big thank you for coming and being with us this morning. And so let's begin. My first question to you, Alinta, is just with regards to where did you get your sense of identity, your sense of belonging from? Where in your childhood, or where did it come from, your sense of identity, your sense of belonging?
I guess it came from, from my parents,
Mm-hmm.
I think, so it's always complex when people ask me where do I belong
Mm-hmm.
because of my background. So my parents my mom is from the Caribbean, she's from Martinique,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad is from Guinea, so he's from
Mm-hmm.
West Africa. I was born in Réunion Island, so I grew up
Mm-hmm.
there until I was 5. So I've always been like into different kind of influences, but I guess because of both, I would acknowledge my my parents, because they both know where they're from, and I think the way probably they educated us. So I had a sense of belonging. So I had the sense that I was from uh, all those influences. Even uh, it's quite weird, because when I was 5, we moved to Martinique. I didn't want to. I remember clearly that I didn't want to move to Martinique, but we moved to Martinique. And when I was in Martinique, I was just claiming I was from Réunion Island. I was just like, that was where I was from. So for my birthday, had the dish from Réunion Island. So in my family, I was the one from Réunion Island. So, and I always thought about going back there,
Yeah.
which I've never actually.
Okay.
And it was my plan this year, but yeah, but it was to go back there. So for a long time, that was also part of my identity. But of course, I think I think my parents, through their education, they gave me this sense of belonging, I guess.
Right. So, sorry. So your mother's from Martinique, your dad's from Guinea, and you were born in Réunion Island, and you held on to that identity. You didn't want to go to Martinique. Why was it that you didn't want to go to Martinique?
I don't remember, but I remember we were packing stuff to move, and I really didn't want to, because I liked my where I was, and I clearly remember. And so it's my mom that told me later on that it was difficult initially for me to settle in Martinique, in the new environments, and that I think I have one of my childhood friends. She said, yeah, she was actually important in you in you being starting to settling in Martinique. I think when we arrived, I had a different accent as well. So I remember the mosquitoes, because we didn't have that many mosquitoes in Réunion where we were. So it's all those small, I guess, memory, and trying to adapt. But it was throughout, yeah, my childhood, actually, throughout my like primary school, I would say, yeah.
So did your parents do anything in particular to help you with that transition, to help you gain that sense of who you were and having moved from Réunion Islands to Martinique? Because for your mum, that was home. Yeah. So what did they take you anywhere, or how did they try to acclimatize you?
I don't remember really. I don't think they did anything. I think even for my mom and for
Yeah.
my dad, it was, and they had to adapt. I think it was because it was because even for my mom, because she has been away for such a long time, it was also trying to adapt to, you know, when you work in a place and you go back and work in, you know, back home, it's a different mentality. So I think even for her, it was difficult. And I think in the family, we are really kind of always kind of not traveling around, but I think we have this, you know, this thing of being interested in other cultures. So it was, I think it was, I think it, I don't say it was difficult, but I think it was just like, you know, it was, you know, we all had to adapt, even my sisters, I think, you know, because, yeah, I think it was a different environment. You had to speak in, like, we obviously were speaking French, but, you know, you had to learn Creole, which was also different. So I learned it at school with my friends, because, you know, my parents weren't, my mom, she spoke Creole, but to my grandma or my auntie, but she wouldn't necessarily speak Creole to us.
Right.
But not because she didn't want to, but it's just like, you know, because at the beginning we didn't know. And my dad, she wasn't speaking Creole to my dad because he didn't know, but he took a course to learn Creole.
Right.
So he learned Creole. So yeah, I guess that's, you know, it's really like through like school. I think school helps, you know, to adapt and to have like close, like to have friends, you know, also helps. So I think it was a little.
So school was the one that helped you to get your sense of belonging. So did school help you to get your sense of belonging when you were at school, primary school, secondary school? What was your interaction with the children there like?
I had, yeah, no, I think it was fine. I mean, school is challenging for every children, but like, yeah, it was, I had like really close friends. I think, you know, the friend I had, they were really good friends and really open-minded, so it helps. My teachers, I was really lucky when I was in primary schools because I had really good teachers, and till today, I'm still in touch with my primary school teacher, the teacher that taught me how to read. So, you know, I saw her, I saw my teachers. I'm like, my mom still see my teachers. So it's especially primary school. And I think actually, even when we're in secondary and when we were in like in sixth form, every time we went going back with some of my friends to my primary school to see my teacher. And when we got our exam, which is a baccalaureate, which is the equivalent of the A level, we actually went to see our primary school teachers. So it's and I think it helped. It helped a lot. I think primary school, yeah, definitely my teachers were crucial because I was in a really, I mean, it was a normal school, but I think I had really good teachers, you know.
I suppose from my perspective, you grew up in the Caribbean, effectively in the Caribbean for the majority of your formative years. Now, because you were surrounded by Black people, Black achievement was something that you were used to, I would have thought, yeah, because everybody was, so that would have helped you to get your sense that I can achieve in whatever I wanted to do. But you also brought up within the French system, okay? So how did that, because now you're living in the UK, how can you compare in terms of your education and your sense of being French or being Caribbean, or was there any dichotomy between those things?
It's really complicated because I think, if I can use the word, it's really schizophrenic, because it's like you are so as you said, like I am in the Caribbean. I mean, when I was growing up, the mayor of the city where I used to live, the main city, Fort-de-France, is Aimé Césaire, who is like a writer, poet, like, you know, of negritude. So he was, so as you say, there was achievement. So I knew it was possible. My teachers, a lot of them were from, you know, Black, or, you know, but the system, the educational system is French. It's really, it's like the French system is about assimilation. So one thing, for example, that is weird is like we learned, like in the French system, you learn the, like, you know, education is really a tool for citizenship. That's what they advocate. Like secularism, school is one of the symbols of being French, of, you know, the French Republic. So when you are at school, I learned, for example, I mean, I think my parents will learn our ancestor, the Gauls. And when my parents learned that, it was there, like Martinique and Guinea were colonies, so they were colonized, you know. So our ancestor, the Gauls, so the Gauls, like the population that was before the Romans arrived. And we didn't learn our ancestor, the Gauls, but I think my teachers changed it to the ancestors, the Gauls, because they were like, we can't say our ancestors. That's what they did. But still, we were learning that. And I remember it was like, I'm translating from French, but the ancestors, the Gauls were blonde, you know, and I'm like, this is in Martinique in the Caribbean. So this is what you learn. And even through the educational system, for example, so you do like, even I'm talking about like sixth form, you do philosophy, we do everything. So the French system is like wherever you are in France or in the French territory, you do exactly the same thing. So if you study history, it is the same. So I remember an instance where we talk about Lewis XIV and the Code Noir, like for slavery, and it was one line in the book. And we are in Martinique, where the whole social, you know, history is surrounded. Is about slavery. So I think there was, you know, if you talk about French literature, we were learning a lot, you know, about white French, you know, man. So even philosophy, but nothing about necessarily Caribbean. Some teachers were teaching it, but it wasn't part of the curriculum. So I think I was lucky that we had books at home. And my dad was a teacher, so I was reading a lot of books around. And so it's a bit weird because you have the society where you have those amazing authors, like you have Césaire, you have Fanon. I mean, you have Frantz Fanon, the name of the street, you have Frantz Fanon, you have like high school. But I think my generation, we didn't learn about Frantz Fanon. Even in the French system, like, you know, French system. And it's only when I came to the UK, I mean, I read his book, but it's only when I came to the UK, people, oh, you're from Martinique, oh, the land of Frantz Fanon. But like in France, no one would ever say that to me. They would talk about Zouk, you know, so they would talk about music. So it's just, it's really complicated. Or, you know, you learn about, you know, because it's a system in France, you know, you learn about Europe, you know. You know, I remember when they were talking about it wasn't called the euro at that time. I think it was called they were going to name the écu, and they showed us a specimen. And I think I was either primary or secondary school. And they said, oh, you would be able to travel to study in Europe, you know, to study. So I knew all about that from a young age.
From a young age, yeah.
And so it's a bit weird but then you are within the Caribbean and you have St. Lucia next door where we share the same language, Creole. And we listen to those music. We listen, actually, I think we are quite diverse in what we listen, because we listen to music from France, but also from the Caribbean, from the US. So, you know, I was relating more to shows like happening in the US, like, you know, watching, you know, the Fresh Prince or whatever. Like for me, that's the accent I was used to was the American accent, not I was hearing English, not the British accent. I only found out about the UK. Well, not found out, but like was more aware about it when I came to France. So, you know, but it was because the tourists were coming were American, if they had any American tourists or whatever, like. Yeah, they were American. So
that sounds really, really interesting in terms of the fact that although you were in the Caribbean, the schooling system almost didn't reflect that it was the cultural identity of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Everything about it was more Eurocentric and focused on that. So the local context didn't come into play. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, except in primary school, because usually in primary school, when you do a bit of geography, you still look at the region you're living.
Yeah.
So I remember studying the tropical rainforest, or, you know, we were going on trips in the island, or seeing the volcano. Like, I know all about the volcano, like, so because we're learning. So there are some things, some aspect of it, you knew, like, you know, or even like just simple like that, you know, like you are in Martinique, so we had to, you know, we had some training, like if there was in case of a earthquake, you know, that probably they would never do in France. So it's,
yes,
you do have some you know, differences because of where you are. But it's true that I would have to say, like, especially if I think about secondary school and sixth form, like the equivalent of sixth form, it was really Eurocentric, you know. So I mean, at least in the teaching. But for example, I would say that in history, and because it's compulsory to teach, to learn, to do history and geography until you leave sixth form, you go to universities, one of the main subjects. So in history and geography, for example, I remember my teacher, again, it's the same program as in France, but we were talking about the Algerian War, for example. And yet, obviously, because you are in Martinique, you are in the context of, like, you know, kind of neocolonialism, if you want to. So we like, I remember we were looking at it in a deeper way that probably I think people would have, some of my friends would have looked at it in France. So there are some little bits like that where you just like, yeah, it's different because, you know, because we are in the Caribbean. So but he has changed. I think there was a call for history and geography teacher within the overseas department to actually, in addition to the curriculum, to have another part, especially in history or geography, where if they were studying about the Second World War, they were studying it in the context of the Caribbean or, for example, an island. But it's been after I left school, so it's recent. It's recent.
Right. That's really interesting, because the thing about it is, I know that you didn't just stay in Martinique, though, that you then went to France for your university education. How did that then compare? Because you've come from a French colony, as it were, right? Or you're regarded as French citizens. How was that transition when you got to France? What was your experience, your expectation? Was it like going to the motherland? Was it the motherland? How was it?
So when I went to France, I went to Toulouse, and actually Toulouse is a place of choices for people from the overseas territories. Like usually it's Bordeaux, Toulouse, Montpellier, the south of France, because, you know, it's nicer than, you know, although we probably all have family in Paris, because you always have like uncle and, you know, people in Paris, but it's like really like there is a high percentage of people from the Caribbean there. So I went to Toulouse, and I was doing like what they call classe préparatoire, which is like a really competitive kind of prep school. So this is a French system. It's really weird. It's from Napoleon. So it's basically like, I think, I hope I'm not making a historical mistake, but it's so basically you have 2 years to prepare a competitive exam that you're unlikely to pass to go into those top schools, like really top schools. So it's like really like the elite. So I think, for example, Imperial has twinning with like one of those schools in France. So you prepare for this really competitive exam, and it's really difficult and tough. And so I did that the first year. I only did 1 year of that. And so when I arrived, like, I remember the first question that people asked me, say, oh, you come from, like, you're from Martinique, but how is the baccalaureate there? And the baccalaureate is the A level. And I'm like, this is the same. This is a national exam. So already I was thinking, they thought, well, it's not the same, you know, or they were asking me questions like, but so the Black people there, where do they come from in Martinique? I said, what do you mean? I said, where do they come from? Are they there from the origin? I was like, no, like slavery, like, you know, yeah. And I'm like, how am I supposed to be in this kind of really competitive course with people that usually they are the top, they got the best grade, and they don't even know about this. But if I was asking a question about, like, you know, the history of France, and I didn't know something, I would be looked as like, you know, stupid. So that's where I started to be like, I mean, I knew about racism because I think my parents talked about it. You know, we've heard stories, but I was really angry, actually. I started really angry. And I remember this is when I read like I read again Frantz Fanon, and it just released all this anger because I'm like, so hang on, I have to learn all the places in France. I have to learn all those cities, and they can't even place Martinique on the map, where we're supposed to be part of the same territory. So I think that was when, you know, you realize the differences, you know, the ignorance of people. Like I was in a student hall, and I remember the lady that was managing the student hall. She thought that I needed a visa. She said, "Oh, but if you need any help with your visa," I'm like, "No, I'm French. I don't need a visa." You know. So I was like, how, why, you know, and then you're like, okay, we learn all those things. We have to be even like learn more than, and you don't even know. So for me, it's like kind of, yeah, again, neocolonialism. Or when people ask me, oh, but how is winter there? And I'm like, we did the same geography lesson. You should know that there's no such thing as winter. You know, I'm like, come on. So I was like, so when then I went to university, and I think it's even I studied history, and I think history is even more reflection of that, because, you know, I remember there was one course, it was like Asian history and sources and text, you know, and text in Haitian history. And the teacher, I think he was just saying, well, so how many of you speak another language? Because you need to speak another language, because a lot of texts are translated in English or German. And then he said, and how many of you have done classics, you know, like Latin and Greek? And we were, I mean, 5 will have done Latin. So I raised my hand, and then they say, well, and Greek. And so we're 3. And I remember the lecturer looking at me, and he said, well, why don't you read the text, you know, in Greek? There was a text in Greek. And I was like, what's the point? Because no one understands in the class. So I read the text, and then at the end of the lesson, he said, but so you studied Greek, but where did you study Greek? I said, yeah, I mean, in Martinique. He's like, oh, really? And I'm like, you're the one that, you know, this is a French system. We do the same thing everywhere. You know, because I think Latin and Greek is in any state school in France. So even if you're like in the worst school ever, you will still have, like, so it's not really, I think, contrary to the UK, it's not really something of social class. It's like quite common.
Everybody does it.
Well, not everybody does it, but it's not only accessible in private school. It's like in state school. So I was like, but how come they, you know, he doesn't know that, you know? So it's all those things, you know. And or I had a teacher, like a lecturer, like talking about we were talking about historiography, and they say, well, history was born in Greece, like the concept of history. And I was like, hang on, no. So this is really Eurocentric. And so we had all of that coming up, or, you know, and my specialism was in later on in like the history, contemporary history of Africa. So again, like one of my lecturers, she asked me, oh, where are you from? And so I was explaining. She was like, oh, you represent the whole French colonial empire. I'm like, why you would say that to me? You could have said the French speaking world, or, you know, the Francophonie. You could have said so many things, but that. And so it's like when you go deeper and deeper, I just find it was really, you know, especially when you study history, like I think like when you start studying like history or social sciences, you realize you know, the misconceptions, or, you know, how it's Eurocentric. And we weren't that many. I mean, I think we were 3 of us, where I knew 3 of us in the history department, Black. You know, probably more North African, but like Black, we were 3 of us. And it's and that's when I realized you know, like, well, not when I realized, but, you know, you could see like you know, I had to learn to unlearn, basically. So
you had to relearn, because there
was,
had
to relearn.
So how did you end up here? How did you end up in the UK?
So I decided, I was like, I don't know what to do next. So I wanted to improve my English, because I was interested, as I said, to history of, you know, like the African, contemporary African history. So I was like, well, I would have preferred to go to Spain, because I usually preferred Spanish to English, but because I was like, there are more English-speaking countries on the continent, so let me improve my English. And I wanted to do an Erasmus program first, but the only Erasmus with Toulouse was something about the history of rugby in the south of England. So I wasn't interested in that. And then one of my friends was studying English. She said, oh, but why don't you become a language assistant? Because you can go there and you get paid. So it's better. So I said, okay. And she said, but don't pick London because there are too many people who wanted to go to London. And so she advised me. And so we picked the same region, which is Merseyside. So I ended up in Liverpool. And I was a language assistant in Liverpool. I taught in Runcorn, actually, in a school in Runcorn. And so it was, when you talk about culture, it's like everything a shock, because first of all, I'm going in a state Catholic school, which is totally against anything French, because, you know, like there is it's really secular. So no, like in France, if you are a religious school, it means that you're a private school, like, you know, because there is no separation of church and state. So I was like in a Catholic schools in Runcorn. And it was mostly predominantly, I think, it was mostly predominantly white working, like mostly white working class. So when I went there and they say, oh, this is Alinta, your language assistant, French language assistant. They'll look at me like, she's not French. So, and I had to say, oh, but you know Thierry Henry, you know. It's like, oh yeah, it's like but actually I really enjoyed being there, because I think I got a sense of what was probably more of a sense of England than if I had been in London, because I was in, you know, north, like Liverpool. So it was, you know, it was interesting to be like really like in a.
It's really interesting the number of places which you've been. And the interactions which you've had within these different environments. So, for example, the fact you started off in Rene Island, then you went to Martinique, then to Toulouse, and then you studied in Paris, didn't you?
No, never. No.
Okay, not in Paris, and then came to Runcorn in the north, the northeast of England. In all of those places, how has your sense of identity and belonging changed whenever you've been in those places?
I think it's interesting, because when you know, it's like what I was saying, like when I left Réunion and I went to Martinique, you know, I was like, I'm from Réunion, I'm from Guinea. When I left Martinique to go to France, like this is my Caribbean just came, you know, and like I'm from the Caribbean. When I came from like France to the UK to England, I realized how French I was. So so it's just those levels, and I was like, oh my God, because there are so many things. And also how French and European, and you know, they say the continents, and when you meet someone from Germany, from Spain, you realize how you share like a common kind of way of thinking, which is different from the British, because the British are really different from the from the rest of Europe. So it's but funny enough, the first year when I was in Liverpool, because I think when you move to a country, there is like a honeymoon period. So I was embracing everything, you know, like even the food, even the food. I was embracing everything, you know. I was, you know, I was reading only in English. Like I was just because I wanted to improve my English. I was reading only in English, watching all the TV, you know, like the TV, etc. So it was. I also realized the differences between France in terms of like diversity, because I thought, okay, I'm in Runcorn. I'm probably the first Black person. I mean, I'm not sure, but at least language assistant, I'm sure. I'm in a situation where sometimes I'm the only Black, or, you know, but still I thought I was, you know, not embraced, but, you know, there was a room for me to talk about where I was from. People were interested. They'll say, oh, but if you're from Martinique, talk about it, you know. So it was, so I think that what I found, it was like, you know, at least at that time, I thought, they welcome diversity, you know. There might be racism, but at least, you know, if you do the job, you know, they are pragmatic, which I found was different from France. So that's what I embraced. But I could also see the, you know, the, like, especially in Liverpool, it's a like there's a heavy history linked to slavery as well in Liverpool. So you can sense that as well, because in terms of like, you know, if you go to Toxtay, the neighborhood, like the one of the neighbor, which is a black, you know, mostly black neighborhood, you have a lot of beautiful Victorian housing, but totally run down. So you can see the you know, the poverty, or so. Yeah, you can also sense that, you know, in Liverpool. So it's quite a complex city, actually, I think.
Yeah. Just wanted to ask you another question then. This is slightly aside from what we've discussed so far. And it's then how, I know that you got into the language teaching, and I know that now you're kind of like a lecturer in art history and things like that. But you also are very much involved with the Sickle Cell Society. So how did that come about? What was the origins of your interest there?
So the first thing was it was because actually I wanted to volunteer with Sickle Society for a long time, but it was first because I was so I have a sickle cell trait, and my nephew has sickle cell. And I remember asking him, like, every time, like, well, not every time, but like we ask him, like, if he's in pain on a scale of 1 to 10, how painful it is. And I was like, but this is really weird, because if you say 7, what is exactly a 7? How do you measure that? And I was talking with someone at Imperial, like at the Center of Language, Culture and Communication, Dr. Anna Neiber. She ran the Gary space, and I was saying, because she knew I was into art history, and I did I curated an exhibition. So I said, oh, one day I want to do something about sickle cell, because I think we don't talk about it enough. And she said, oh, but you could do in the small Gary space. So we did an exhibition called Color of Pain, and for the exhibition we had we programmed also a talk, and I contacted the Sickle Cell Society to see if they wanted to talk about it, and also I think it was Dr. Fred Peel from Imperial College. So that's how it started. And because I was doing, you know, I was on the Sickle Cell Society website, I saw that they had a job advertised to be a research and education coordinator to work on the heritage project. And when I read the job description, I was like, oh, but this is all the thing that I've been doing, but because it was linked to history, oral history, you know, talking about heritage. So I applied for the job, and I got it. So that's how it ended up, you know, working for the Sickle Cell Society. And because I thought that, so I thought it was also interesting that is one of the it's not a rare disease, but no one knows about it again.
It's almost a hidden, because it's very much viewed as a black people's disease, as it were, or black people's illness. It may not get the same kind of exposure, for want of another word. So I'm just thinking about how it's through your family connection and through your own connection, which has drawn you into the advocacy and the working towards development of training and education materials for the Sickle Cell Society. What would you like to see develop? I'm going to open it up to the audience in a minute, but how would you like to see sickle cell expressed going forward in the future?
I think one thing that came across, because for the project we did almost 32 interviews of some patients, but also like activists, and I think it was also I feel like it's still, they are invisible, and I want the voice of the patients to be heard, because sometimes, especially when they go to hospitals or when they face a medical, you know, even in the medical sector, they are not taken into account. And I think that's something that is, even with other illnesses that they try to develop, is like patient's voice, because the patient, someone was telling me, you have several health experts, and the patient is the first expert because he knows. And I think they are not heard, and they are always invisible, and they go to the emergency and they are in pain already, and they have to express, and they're not listened to. And I think that's something that came across all the interviews, like, to be heard. And for me, I mean, I'm not like, because I came in the charity for this project, I'm not like, policy maker, but I do believe, strongly believe that art would be a really good tool to actually advocate for sickle cell, because it's really powerful. And I would like to do more work around that, or to enable people, because a lot of people that I interview, actually, they were artists as well. So funny enough, and they were using poetry, photography, visual art to express how they feel, because they are not seen. They're still really invisible on so many levels. So that's why I would like them to be heard. Well, yeah,
that's brilliant. I see a couple of questions in the chat, or at least one question in the chat. I'm going to ask if there are anyone else who has a question for Alinta. Then, if you want to raise your hand, then now's the time where we can just ask them. But I'm going to kick off. Omar, I believe you've got a question that you wanted to ask. If anyone else, just raise your hands. I can see William also has a question. So, Omar, do you want to start, and then William afterwards?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Wayne. And Alinta, thank you very much for sharing with us so far. I just wanted to know, coming from obviously a French Caribbean background, and obviously experience of having grown up in France as a person of French speaking extraction. Just wanted to know, how do you feel people of the African diaspora from French speaking countries in Africa and the Caribbean, but also South America, are presented in France today?
Yeah, I think there is more visibility. Definitely in the media has changed a lot. I think you have more voices, but it's still really difficult. There are still some like prejudice, but I think now you have more voices. You have like, for example, Rokhaya Diallo. She's like a journalist, and she talks more about that issue related to the Black community in France. So there is a sense of more visibility, when you have like a show like on Netflix with Omar Sy, like Lupin, and Lupin is like something we've seen the original, like the old French series. And so you're like, wow, that's amazing, because we did growing up, as I said, we didn't have that. So we are looking at American show. So I think there is more visibility, but it's still really difficult because of the French way of assimilation. So when you start talking about your experience as a Black person, or like racism, institutional racism, it's so difficult to talk about it in the French media, because people say, no, you can't say that, France is not racist, etc. So it's the conversation is still difficult, but I think it has evolved because now the younger generation, they are more vocal, especially with what happened last year. I think it had an impact also in France to challenge, the way history is told. For example, this year, so that's why I'm saying it's really complex. This year, this is I think bicentenary of like the anniversary of like the commemoration of Napoleon. Napoleon is the one that reestablished slavery in France. And so you have the commemoration of Napoleon, and then, but in May, this is the month of also the abolitions of slavery, because it was, it's in May. So you had the French president that did a discourse for the commemoration of Napoleon, but then for the commemoration of slavery, there was a ceremony, but he said nothing. And I'm like, so you actually alienated the part of the population, because this is fine to talk about Napoleon. Yeah, he had an impact. Obviously, it's a historical figure, but you're not only telling the story, because for us in the Caribbean, this is the guy that reestablished slavery. He was abolished and he was reestablished. So you cannot talk about that. And I think it just shows the problems in France. Is like, on one hand, yeah, you have a law about recognizing slavery as crimes against humanity, and it's been advocated by people in France. But on the other hand, when you start to say, but Napoleon did that, you say, but overall he was a great historical figure. So that's the problem in France. It's like one step forward and one step backward, I feel.
That's a brilliant question, Omar. Thank you for that. William, you had a question as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alinta. Yeah, great, very interesting talk. Two, if I may, and I'll try and make them brief then. So, because you say you've got both Guinean and Martinican background, in relation to France, is there a difference between the way continental Africans that live in France are treated and the way that people from the French Caribbean are treated? And then you said when you were in Martinique, you had awareness of African Americans. I wonder, did you have any awareness of Black British culture? And now living in Britain, what has your kind of awareness of Black British culture become in comparison to French culture?
No, I think when I was in Martinique, no awareness. I mean, not no awareness of Black British culture. You know, I knew something, but it wasn't really what it was more when we're studying English. What I remember most, it was when we were looking at the US or even like South Africa, actually, as a matter of fact. But if I think about the African and the Caribbean, like African community and Caribbean community, I think it's a bit like in the UK. Within France, there's always been sometime a clash. But I think also it's different from the UK, because if you are from the Caribbean, you're French. You know, you are part of the French overseas territory. So you're not, it's not like it's different. Whereas like if you are from African heritage, you know that your parents were immigrants, like so the Caribbean, that's the shock. What happened is like when you're from the Caribbean, you arrived in France, you're like, I'm French anyway, but then you're treated differently because what they see is like you're Black. So, they think that they have an entitlement, like when they arrived in France, because they're like, okay, I'm French anyway, but then, but you're treated, if you go for job interviews, you're Black. So that's, but it's true. There've always been some kind of, sometimes misconception about one another. Like even some friends, they were like, oh, but your dad is from Guinea and your mom is from Martinique and they're still together. I say, yeah, because for them it doesn't make sense. Or my dad told me a story when he was a student. He went to France and they had to validate his ticket, and the guy that was doing it was from the Caribbean, from Martinique, I think. And when he was seeing my dad, he thought that he was from the Caribbean as well. So he was like, he wasn't putting the stamp on the sticker, so he could use it again and again in the metro at that time. But then one day he spoke Creole to my dad, and he couldn't, because at that time he didn't know anything, so he couldn't answer. And so it was like, and say, no, I'm Guinean. And so then from that time, he just stamped the ticket. So it means that he was like, yeah, you're not one of us. So it shows the relation, because he could have said, my Black brother, my African brother. No, it's like, you're not Caribbean, so I'm not helping you. So there's a bit of tension, and I think from the African side, like sometimes they see like Caribbean as being alienated, and from the Caribbean side, like I've heard stuff, okay, yeah, but like misconception about the Africans. So I've seen it a lot, even when I was a student, so it is, I mean, although you do have, the Afro-Caribbean, society, like you have Afro-Caribbean, you share the music, people like the music of both, places, but I think, there is still sometimes some tension that does exist also, I think, in the UK, sometimes between African and Caribbean, misconceptions. And I relate that also to, even, history and, the fact that you don't know, I mean, it's like people make like, I've instance of like even in Martin, people saying to my dad, yeah, you go back to your country, or, making fun of the name. And you're like, where do you think you come from? So so it's still there. I mean, less probably now than before, but I think it's sometimes still there. So yeah, there are some tensions, but there is a really good film on Netflix called Simply Black, which is about, the Black experience in France, and it talks about that, the different communities. So it's a really good film to get a sense of what is the Black experience in France, actually.
There was Thanks for those two questions, William, and Omar for your question as well. There's something that you just said which really kind of like got me thinking with regards to that kind of like, it was the story of your dad and the man thinking he was from the Caribbean, but when he couldn't speak Creole, it's kind of like, well, you ain't one of us. Right? Right? And that notion of othering, being othered, even just because we may well look a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that we are that certain person, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So in your experiences, have there been times when you felt that you've been othered, and how have you overcome those things? Maybe it's something to think about, because it's just it was just thinking about what you said about your dad, and because there he was definitely being othered, he was being classed as an outsider. Mm-hmm. Even though some would have said, well, we're all black together, and it kind of like throws open this notion. I know a lot of people don't like the acronym BAME, because then it clumps everyone together as Black, Asians, minority ethnics. It clumps them all together. But yet here we can clearly see that there was definite differences, which everybody recognizes and understands. So I just, because you've kind of like lived in so many different places and have experienced it from such a diverse point of view, it's how have you managed to come out and feel that I say that I can belong? What is it that helps you to feel that you can belong?
I think it's really difficult, because, but I think it's acknowledging that, I think for me it was more like, acknowledging my, the complexity of my identity, because I think that's what we don't always, we really as human beings want to put people into boxes. So once you can't put this person into boxes, you're just like, yeah, she's other, she's not part of, and I think it was more acknowledging my complexity, that the complexity, there is no one straight answer, and people want me to give them a straight answer. So every time someone asks me, where are you from? I'm always like, well, I don't know. But it's not because I don't know, it's just because I'm like, I don't know if I want to go deep into this conversation now, or, if I say France, like, I know I'm only saying part of the story, So it's just being fine with it, and just being okay with it, because I think what you're saying about BAME, like, there was this Martinique author was saying, like, you have the right of opacity, and people were like, oh, what do you mean? And it's like, no, because if you acknowledge people's right to be like complex, or to not to be, that you can't really define them, then you acknowledge their humanity. And all the thing that happened with like colonialism, or white supremacy, was to put, like, you have the white that have the right to be like who they are, and then the rest of us, we are others. And you see that in so many instances, like when you put world music together, and you put like rhythm from India with rhythm from West Africa, has nothing to do. So I think when you put everyone into one box, like others, and you try to define, you have to write. So I had to be vocal about that. I mean, there's something simple when I have to tick boxes about my ethnicity, and you have the choice between Black African or Black Caribbean. That doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. Because I'm both, so I have to pick one or the other. So I always put other.
Yeah.
And I think, but what do you mean by other? But, you know, because it's like, you know, I have to acknowledge that it's both, you know, my experience is different from my mom, and I'm different also from my dad, because I have to, so I'm sharing. So I think it was, I think if I'm answering the question, I'm not sure, but it's really that it was just being okay with it. But I understand, knowing that, I understand the difficulties of, you know, even if I think about France, of people born in France of, you know, North African or, you know, West African origin, and being told constantly you need to be, you know, to integrate yourself, or, you know, being between, and the fact that sometimes you don't have necessarily this sense of identity, because you always have to prove yourself, you know, and it's difficult. So I think it's acknowledging that, you know, we are different. So this is me, you know. You have to accept me as it is.
So it's accepting yourself, not holding on to what other people put as labels on you.
That's pretty, you know, because it's complex. I mean, I've been in this country for I don't know how long. So part of me is influenced by like, I'm British in some aspect now. My nephew thinks I'm British, you know. So they say your country. I'm like, this is not my country. So for them, I'm British. So this is just, you know, life. But if we say home, I would always say Martinique, because this is where, as you say, I grew up. So there's a sense of belonging there. But at the same time, you can't take out of me the fact that, you know, I've lived in different places, and I'm, you know, if one day I leave the UK, you know, I'm leaving a home as well. So, you know, just that was home, you know, as well. So,
Alinta, I just want to say a big thank you for the insight that you've shared with us today. It's been really fascinating hearing your story, your journey, your transitions. It's been absolutely brilliant, the insight that you've given us. I'm going to just highlight what's happening next week. I do believe that tomorrow is World Awareness of Sickle Cell.
Yes, and I believe Sickle Cell Day, so tomorrow. And so if you are in London, you can come to the Black Cultural Archive to see the exhibition we put on for the Sickle Cell Society, which is about their history. So it's all about belonging, the history and memory of sickle cell in the UK from 1950 to 2020 to nowadays. And, you know, acknowledging the work of the charity sector, the voluntary sector, activists, and also the voice of people with sickle cell. And the exhibition is been extended actually until the end, till 17th of July. So,
brilliant.
So, but brilliant. You can go and see it. Yeah.
That sounds like a must to me. It sounds like people should be flocking there to see our history. All right. So that's brilliant. I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Right, just very quickly. So thank you, Alinta. We had Alinta with us today. Next week, we're going to have Kevin, who's an activist against anti-Black racism. And he's going to be with us next week. So it's going to be a really good discussion, I can assure you. And then if you haven't seen any of our other belonging interviews, then you can see it on our YouTube site, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's tuned in every week and who supported us, and please continue, and we'll continue to provide the content and the discussions which we have been doing. So I want to wish everyone a happy Friday afternoon and a good weekend. Take care, and I will see you next week.